Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm so excited for this one. Today, I'm reading Drop the Act, one of my 911 fics. I just released this. Oh my god. Literally, this was supposed to be a one-shot, but I wanted to post more stuff on AO3 because it's been a while. So I decided, I have almost 18,000 words for this fic, so why not post it? It is 5 chapters right now, as of when I'm saying all this. Oh my god, it makes me really happy. But yeah. So, oh my god, I think you people will love this. I hope you love it. Yeah. So, I'm gonna read the summary and then I'll read chapter 1. And depending on how long, this video is by the time I get done with the first part of chapter 1, will depend on if I split chapter 1 into 2 parts. So, yeah. Anyways, okay, I'll read the summary now and then I'll read chapter 1. Okay. Enjoy! Drop the act. Summary. Who's your favorite character? Buck asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Eddie sat there, thinking, for a moment, before he said, I think Tyler's my favorite. I mean, sure, he's hunting down Ollie and being really stupid, but the way his character's progressed since he was first shown on screen an hour ago, it just shows how much life can change people, and I relate to that. Buck liked hearing that from Eddie, because Buck had been the one to pitch the idea for his character to have a redemption by the time the end credits hit. Have everyone hate him at the beginning, and then slowly reveal small snippets of his past that help everyone understand why Tyler is the way he is. I also like the way the actor's portraying him, Eddie tacks on, and that makes Buck extremely happy, because he is that actor. At that moment, Eddie turned his gaze onto Buck. Buck blinked twice before Eddie spoke. Buck, you said this is one of your favorite movies, so do you know who plays Tyler? And of course Eddie would ask that. Or, Evan Buck Buckley is an actor who goes by the name Daniel Buckley, and his family doesn't know. Chapter 1. I panicked and basically asked him on a date. Hey, what are you guys watching? Buck asked, walking up the stairs to the loft. He leaned against the back of the couch that Hen and Eddie were sitting on while Chim sat in an armchair nearby. On the TV was a movie that looked to be at least 10 years old. Buck recognized the scene on the screen, but he couldn't put his finger on what movie it was from. Eddie was the first to acknowledge him. He smiled at Buck with that bright-ass fucking smile that made Buck's knees wobble. He wasn't the one to answer his question, though. Hen was. It's called More to You. It's about Hen was cut off by Chim. It's about this man who finds out that his wife isn't who he thought she was, and that's not even because she was putting on an act. It's because she's from another world, Chim exclaimed, gesturing wildly. Buck laughed as he hopped over the back of the couch and sat between Eddie and Hen. Eddie had apparently anticipated that Buck would do that, because before Buck did, Eddie moved the bowl of popcorn that was between them. Once Buck was seated, Eddie set the bowl on Buck's lap. Buck smiled at Eddie before turning his attention to Chim, as he ate a handful of popcorn. I know, he said before swallowing. I've watched this movie. It's one of my favorites. Chim looked at Buck dumbstruck, but he also looked like he'd just been handed a treasure chest full of surprises. Who's your favorite character? Chim asked, almost falling out of the armchair he was sitting in. Probably the little girl, Holly. Most people say her part's insignificant to the plot, but without her, the entire storyline would have been different. She played such an impactful role that gets discredited, Buck explained, as he took another handful of popcorn. There was another reason Buck liked Holly, not just for the character's impact on the story, but because her actor was probably the nicest person on that set. She always made Buck feel welcomed, and she didn't judge him like a lot of the cast did. I like her too, but I think my favorite has to be Ollie, Hen said, before elaborating on why. I have two reasons. One, I love her actress, and two, she's literally playing an unworldly character. She's just so amazing. Buck could tell that someone had a celebrity crush on Sasha Dewitt. Buck agreed with Hen on the fact that Sasha was amazing. Buck had a lot of scenes with her since he was supposed to be playing a teenager hunting down an unknown creature. She was always so sweet to Buck. Buck smiled at Hen before looking at Eddie. And you? He asked, waiting expectantly for Eddie's answer. Me what? Eddie asked, as if he had no idea what Buck was asking him, because he'd been in La La Land or something. Who's your favorite character? Buck asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Eddie sat there, thinking for a moment before he said, I think Tyler's my favorite. I mean, sure, he's hunting down Ollie and being really stupid, but the way his character's progressed since he was first shown on the screen an hour ago, it just shows how much life can change people, and I relate to that. Buck liked hearing that from Eddie, because Buck had been the one to pitch the idea for his character to have a redemption by the time the end credits hit. Have everyone hate him at the beginning, and then slowly reveal small snippets of his past that help everyone understand why Tyler is the way he is. I also like the way the actor's portraying him, Eddie tacks on, and that makes Buck extremely happy because he is that actor. At that moment, Eddie turned his gaze onto Buck. Buck blinked twice before Eddie spoke. Buck, you said this is one of your favorite movies, so do you know who plays Tyler? And of course Eddie would ask that. Buck sighed internally. He's a terrible liar, but he didn't really want his friends to know about the fact that he's an actor, so he doesn't lie. But he doesn't tell the entire truth either. His name's Daniel Buckley. He's actually in a lot of the movies I like to watch, he said, smiling at Eddie. Here, I'll pull him up on Google. Buck grabbed his phone and started to look himself up. Wait, Chim said, and Buck stopped mid-search to look at him. Stopped mid-search to turn and look at him. Wasn't your brother's name Daniel Buckley? Chim seemed scared to ask the question, very uncomfortable. He looked like he wanted to jump out of his skin. Buck gave him a toothy grin that was only a little bit strained. Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons I like the actor so much. Not only is he good at acting, but he has the same name as Daniel, so I like to think that he's Daniel if he survived the cancer, Buck explained, and he wasn't lying. Everything he said was true. He just didn't mention the fact that he was Daniel Buckley. And he was called that because his parents wanted him to make a name for his brother since he couldn't save him. Apparently, Eddie noticed the strain in his smile because Buck felt a hand rest on his lower back. It was comforting, grounding. Buck liked it, so he leaned into the touch. Anyways, Buck exclaimed as he turned his focus back onto his phone, where he'd pulled up his Wikipedia page. Here's his Wikipedia page, he said, handing his phone off to Eddie. Eddie took it with his right hand and started skimming over it. Buck watched out of the corner of his eye as Hen and Chim both took out their phones and started typing something in. He assumed they were looking up Daniel Buckley. He smiled to himself because getting his friends hooked on his acting means more viewership on the movies and shows he's been in. And because Buck knows Chim, he knows that Chim is going to follow him on Instagram tonight, stalk his account, and then post on his account about how he enjoyed More to You. Buck knows that Chim has a few hundred followers, but even the smallest boost could get him more projects. Huh, Eddie said, drawing Buck out of his train of thought. Apparently Eddie felt Buck's gaze because he elaborated. He doesn't know a lot of the stuff that Christopher watches, Eddie said, turning the phone around so Buck could see the screen. Ah, shit. Buck had told Christopher about him being an actor so long ago that Buck had almost forgotten about it. It had been during the tsunami, when they were just standing on top of that ladder truck. Christopher had asked Buck what he liked to do in his free time, and Buck told him that he didn't really get a lot of that because he was always too busy memorizing a script for an upcoming project. Christopher had been ecstatic to learn about Buck being an actor, and if he told Eddie about it later, well, then Eddie must have thought that it was just the natural disaster messing with Chris's mind. Yeah, Buck said, chuckling as he gave Eddie a genuine smile. I told Christopher about Daniel Buckley, and he had asked what movies and shows I thought would interest him. I sent them to him, and There have been a few times that we've curled up on the couch to watch some of... Buck was cut off by Hen. "Oh my god," Hen exclaimed, standing up abruptly. "This is how I find out?" Hen practically screamed at Buck as she shoved her phone in his face. "Find out what?" Buck asked, heart hammering in his chest because he assumed that she'd figured him out. He pushed her phone out of his face so he could see the screen properly. "Daniel Buckley's starring in an upcoming movie with Sasha Dewitt," Hen yelled at Buck as she threw her hands in the air in exasperation. "Why didn't you tell me, Buck?" She gave him a half-hearted glare. Buck let out a short sigh. She didn't figure him out. "Well, I haven't really looked him up on any platform for the last month. When did they release the information that he's starring in a new movie with Sasha?" Buck asked, nonchalantly, because apparently he's getting smoother at telling lies. Hen said before checking her phone. "It was announced last week." She scanned Buck up and down as she assessed him. "Okay, you're off the hook this time, Buckley. But next time you find out that Sasha Dewitt is in an upcoming movie or show with whatever actor you like, tell me," Hen demanded, and Buck smiled. "Yes, ma'am," Buck said, giving her a mock salute as he straightened his back. She hit him in the arm with her phone. "Ow!" he exclaimed, rubbing his arm. "Hey, no abusing the Buckley," Eddie said, still staring at Buck's phone. "He can't do his job properly if he hurts his shoulder again. He'll think it's a new spirit." Eddie smirked after saying the last bit and glanced up from the phone for just a second to catch Buck's glare. It only made Eddie's smirk grow. "You're such an asshole," Buck said, no heat behind his words as he shoved Eddie playfully. "Oh?" Chim said as he started to snicker. "You mean the Billy Boyles curse?" Chim was trying his hardest to hold back a snort as Buck turned his glare onto him. "I still believe that he was haunting me," Buck said, crossing his arms as he turned his head to look at the TV so he didn't have to look at Eddie or Chim. "Did you ever find out what actually caused the boils, Buck?" Hen asked, and when Buck turned his head to look at her, she had her hands on her hips and an eyebrow raised. Buck deflated under her gaze. "It was an allergic reaction," Buck sighed, as he looked down at the ground. Buck felt Eddie shift beside him, shifting as if he was uncomfortable? No, worried. Worried is what it was. "What did you have that caused the reaction?" Eddie asked, and when Buck turned to look at him, Eddie had this serious look on his face. He was worrying about Buck. Buck, of all people. Buck still can't believe he had people who cared enough about him to worry about his well-being and overall health. Apparently after I dislocated my shoulder, Tommy gave me a leave, Buck didn't get to finish because Eddie cut him off. Has naproxen in it," Eddie said, through gritted teeth. He was pissed off. Buck could tell, because he'd been on the other end of the stare that Eddie was giving the table since Tommy wasn't at the firehouse. "That son of a bitch." Buck agreed wholeheartedly, because he knew that he'd told Tommy about his naproxen allergy several times before, what Chim calls the Billy Boyles curse. "Oh, I didn't pause correctly, sorry." Buck agreed wholeheartedly because he knew that he'd told Tommy about his naproxen allergy several times before, what Chim calls the Billy Boyles curse. "Sorry." "Yeah," Buck said, quieter than he meant. "I guess Tommy really wasn't the best boyfriend," he caved, sighing as he sunk further into the couch. "Are you just realizing this?" Hen asked, casting a glance at Chim. "Yeah, because Hen and I have been telling you how much of an asshole he is," Chim added, not very seriously, but Buck could tell that he meant what he was saying. Buck groaned as he leaned into Eddie's touch. "I asked you guys why you thought he was an asshole, but you never answered me. You guys just said, if you haven't figured it out yet, then you'll just have to wait. You'll know when it happens. I have no fucking clue what you guys were talking about, even now." Hen sighed as she sat back down next to Buck and took his hands into hers. "Okay, so this might be hard, but..." Hen started before Buck cut her off. "I can take hard," Buck said, grinning wildly as he tried to lighten the mood. Eddie snorted behind him and Chim fell out of the armchair because he was laughing so hard. Hen just slapped his hand as she snickered. Okay, are you done with your gay jokes? Hen questioned, after a few moments. Buck nodded. Okay, so you know that Tommy was a part of the 118, right? Hen asked, serious now that she was telling Buck whatever she was telling him. Yeah, Buck said, blinking slowly. When I joined, I was filling a spot. Well, Chim and I got to know Tommy after working with him for so long, and let's just say he's not the best person. Hen continued, squeezing Buck's hand slightly. Okay, Buck said, scrutinizing Hen. Can you just rip the Band-Aid off so I don't have to have an internal panic attack? Buck was very impatient and he knew it. Hen sighed, a bone-deep, tired one. To be frank, Tommy was a racist, misogynist asshole. Buck blinked at just how frank that explanation was. He let it sink in for a minute before he reacted. Ew! Buck exclaimed as he shook out his hands. God, I can't believe I let someone like him touch me, let alone anywhere within 20 feet of me. Buck's whole body shook. My hatred towards Tommy just keeps growing, Eddie said, no emotion in his tone, or at least the emotion wasn't obvious. Buck could hear the anger, frustration, and guilt behind Eddie's words. He was about to ask about it when the tones went off. The four of them got to their feet quickly and made their way downstairs to change. Then they jumped in the engine and were on their way to an emergency. People are so stupid. Buck knew that, of course. I mean, he's seen a lot of stupid shit on the job, but this was not normal. They pulled up to the house that the call came from. It was a very nice house. It was 2 stories tall with a balcony on the second floor that sat above the front door. Buck felt like the house looked familiar, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He shrugged it off as they approached the door. Buck pounded on the door. LAFD, anyone home? He called, waiting for a beat. There was a call from inside. They said something about not being able to open the door, so Chim used the battering ram. Oh, just great, the woman sighed, and Buck froze in the doorway. Of course he recognized this house. He'd been over here so many times over the years. He smirked before making his way towards her. She was on the floor. Apparently, she'd been walking around her house in a bikini when she slipped on a dog toy. She ended up hitting the table next to the stairs with her head. She was able to sit up, but she said that she couldn't move her legs. Buck crouched in front of her before resting his hand on her forearm for some reassurance before he made fun of her. Just a little bit. Hi, Izza, Buck said, drawing out the hi to make her mad. It worked. She glared daggers at him. How are you feeling? He asked, an innocent smile playing on his lips. Out of all the firehouses in L.A., your firehouse had to be the one to respond? Isabella complained, and when she realized the looks of "What are you talking about?" from the rest of Buck's team, she backtracked. Not that there's anything wrong with the 118, it's just that Buck's there, she said, gesturing towards him. Jim snorted and Hen smiled while Eddie rolled his eyes fondly. I would hit you if you weren't already injured, Buck threatened, with no heat. She just smiled at him while Chim and Hen started asking her questions. Buck stood and took a step away from her. He just watched as his friends took care of the woman he grew up with. The woman who was like an older sister to him. Not in the same way Maddie was, because Maddie basically raised him, but Isabella was always there for him, on and off of set. Hey, he heard a voice whisper in his left ear. He turned his head slightly to see who it was. He caught the brown eyes of the man whispering in his ear. How do you know her? Eddie asked, an unknown emotion in his voice. Buck blinked for a minute before he responded. Isabella's basically my older sister, honestly, Buck said, smiling. We met years ago. I was probably 8 or 9 the first time we met. She was like 15 or 16, I think. Eddie was staring at him expectantly, so Buck continued. It was just a random meeting, he said, feeling the need to reassure Eddie. We met at this coffee shop in Pennsylvania that I'd only been to probably a total of 4 times prior to meeting her. Buck held up 4 fingers to emphasize his point. She was just doing homework on her laptop at a table in the corner, so after I ordered my hot chocolate, because I wasn't allowed to have coffee, I decided to just sit across from her because all the other tables had at least one person at each, and she looked like the nicest person there, Buck explained, gesturing wildly as he talked. So then you guys just, talked and became friends while you were waiting for your hot chocolate? Eddie guessed, and Buck nodded, because that really was how they met. It was just a coincidence that she was starring in the same movie he was a week later. That's really the only reason they kept in contact. And that cafe became their go-to hangout spot because Buck's parents hated the place and wouldn't come within 10 feet of the building, even if it was a zombie apocalypse and it was the closest building to them. Then, a question for Isabella popped into Buck's head. He turned just in time to see Chim and Hen lifting Izza onto a gurney. Izza? Buck questioned, drawing out the A. She just hummed in response. Are you going to the dinner party tomorrow? Buck asked as he followed the gurney. If I'm out of the hospital, I will definitely be there. But if I'm still hospitalized, then you need to bring me some food, she said, pointing a finger in Buck's face before Hen and Chim loaded her into the ambulance and followed her in. Yes, ma'am, Buck said, doing the same mock salute he'd done to Hen just a little while earlier, as Eddie started to close the doors to the ambulance. Izza just rolled her eyes with a fond smile before calling out, It was nice to see you, Evan. That made Buck smile. He loved Izza. Eddie finished closing the doors and pounded on it twice to let the driver know that they were all clear to drive. Once the ambulance pulled away, Eddie turned his gaze to Buck. Come on, let's go, Eddie said, gesturing towards the engine. Buck jumped up to Eddie's side. They walked to the engine, and Eddie held the door open for him. He even bowed as he pretended to be a servant or guard for Buck, saying, For you, your majesty. It made Buck laugh as he sat down. What's got you all giggly, Buck? Bobby asked, raising an eyebrow as he turned in his seat to look at him. Buck gave his dad, because Bobby was his dad, a toothy grin as he responded. Eddie, he said, as he giggled even more. And he giggled even more when Bobby just rolled his eyes. There was fondness written all over his face, though. When isn't it, Eddie? He asked, shaking his head. Eddie smirked when he sat next to Buck. I'm very funny, Eddie deadpanned, shrugging at Bobby. It was Buck's turn to roll his eyes. Yes, Eddie, you're hilarious, Buck said, glancing at Eddie, who just smiled. Buck bumped their shoulders together. There was a moment of comfortable silence between the three of them after that. All of them were smiling. Then Eddie asked, So, Buck, you're going to a dinner party tomorrow? Eddie didn't sound mad, but he did sound confused and maybe a little left out. That made Buck feel bad. Dinner party? Bobby asked, brow furrowing in confusion. With who? And where? Buck swallowed. How should he play this? He said, dumbly, before shutting his mouth again. Then he sighed. Okay, so, one of my close friends is having a dinner party, Buck started to explain. It's just a bunch of us hanging out and partying. None of it was a lie. All of the cast were his close friends. The party's going to be at Sam's house. He's the one throwing the dinner party, Buck continued. He told us to bring a +1, or come with someone who's already invited. Buck just shrugged at the questioning looks thrown his way. I think he has a bunch of partnered games planned, he explained. Sam has always loved to play games, but games with teams have always been his favorites. So that's why you asked your friend, Isabella, if she was going to be at the party? Eddie asked, raising an eyebrow. He still looked like he'd just been punched in the gut, but he didn't look as bad as he had a few minutes ago. Yeah, she's the only person I'm super close to that's going, Buck said, smiling to try and make Eddie feel better. It wasn't really working. But now that there's a chance she won't be able to make it, I have to try and find someone else to go with me. Buck froze. His mouth was moving faster than his brain. He was going to have to find someone to go to the party with now that Izza might not be able to make it. Buck quickly grabbed his phone from his pocket. What are you doing, Buck? Bobby asked, sounding slightly worried. Eddie also looked worried, but he could look over Buck's shoulder to see what he was doing. Bobby couldn't. I'm texting the group to see if anyone needs someone to be their partner for tomorrow, he explained as he opened the cast group chat. He wasn't worried about Eddie figuring him out as he did, because the group chat was saved as It's Just a Bet, Man, which technically was the name of the next movie he was starring in, but Eddie doesn't need to know that. Also, the group chat wasn't really used to talk about what they did on set or anything. They really just sent memes and planned hangouts. Buck quickly typed out a message to the group. Dan, but Buck. 1625. Hey, does everyone have a +1 for tomorrow? Buck tapped his fingers on the side of the screen as he waited for a response. Then he was flooded with replies. Warden, 1627. I thought you and Izza were going together? Ho ho ho, 1627. Izza said that you were going with her. Check please, 1627. Is Izza unable to make it? Riley, 1627. Yo, at Izza, you good? Francesca. I can't speak, I'm so sorry. Francesca, 1627. Buck, if my best friend can't make it to the party, I will cry, and I'm having an amazing eyeliner day. Frankie, 1627. Izza would tell us if something was wrong. Frankie, 1628. Right? Right? Line, 1628. Evan, whatever your middle name is, Buckley, respond. Steph GG, 1628. Buck, are you alive? Buck smiled at the texts. He loved the cast he was working with. They were all hilarious, but they also cared. Buck didn't want them to worry, so he texted them back. Dan but Buck, 1629. I'm alive! Line, 1629. Is Izza? Frankie, 1629. Buckley, tell us she's okay. Riley, 1629. Tom, why was your first thought that she died? Line, 1629. Because Buck said he was alive, so I just said the shortest message. I don't really think she died. Riley, 1630. Okay. Dan but Buck, 1630. Okay, so y'all know how I'm a firefighter, yeah? Benny for more, 1630. Yes. Camp Bell, 1630. You've been on the news, man. Jolene, 1631. You never stop talking about your fire family. Windmill, 1631. How is this relevant to Izza? Dan but Buck, 1632. This is kind of a long story, but just to warn you guys, so bear with me while I type it out. Riley, 1632. Well, that's not ominous. Rolling eyes emoji. Warden, 1632. You got 4 seconds because 5 is too long. Steph GG, 1632. Lol, Sam, crying face emoji. Check please, 1633. Hurry up. Dan but Buck, 1634. Okay, so I'm on shift right now, so we got a call. Normal, right? So then we get to the house, and I low-key kind of recognize it, but I didn't realize whose house it was. Turns out it was Izza's house. Anyways, she slipped and just couldn't get back up. So she's currently on the way to the hospital to get checked out. And due to her injury, she might not be able to make it to the party. Francesca, 1635. No, my best friend! Benny for more, 1635. She's okay though, right? Steph GG, 1635. Poor Izza. Ho ho ho, 1635. I should not be focused on this, but what did she slip on? Frankie, 1635. I hope she's okay. Dan but Buck, 1636. She was alert and talking when she got in the ambulance, so I think she'll be fine. And Holly, she slipped on a dog toy. Get your mind out of the gutter. Ho ho ho, 1636. I'm sorry, I just need to know for science. Crying face emoji. Riley, 1636. I'm glad you think she'll be okay. Jolene, 1636. I'm so glad she's not dead. Windmill, 1637. Izza's so strong. Flexing emoji. Warden, 1637. I'm glad she's okay, but Buck, to answer your question, everyone has someone to go with already. Dan but Buck, 1638. Sighs. I thought that'd be the case. Downcast emoji. Frankie, 1638. If you want, I can set you up. Francesca, 1638. Don't trust her. Jolene, 1638. I concur. She set me up and my date ended up being really weird. Frankie, 1639. That was a fluke in my system. Dan but Buck, 1639. Yeah, I'm good, Luce. I'll figure something out. Thanks, guys. Buck closed out his messages and let his head hit the wall behind him. He groaned. Now he had to actually find someone to go with. Maybe he could ask Sasha, but he was pretty sure that she had a shoot tomorrow. She'd posted something about it on Instagram. Maybe Sophia, but they haven't talked since they wrapped up filming that one movie a few years ago. Buck doesn't have time for his subconscious to remember what the name of that movie was. You okay? Bobby asked from the front seat. He must have turned around when he heard the thunk of Buck's head. Yeah, I'm fine, Buck said, waving off his concern. I need to find a +1 to go with me tomorrow, but everyone I can think of is busy. Buck buried his head in his hands as he groaned again. I'm offended, Eddie said, and Buck hadn't even thought about Eddie. Holy shit, he must seem like such a bad friend right now. Fuck, Buck said, turning his head to look at Eddie. I'm so sorry, Eddie. I just didn't think you'd want to go, you know? I thought you'd want to hang out with Chris. Eddie rolled his eyes fondly and smiled, but it was strained. Chris is a teenager now, Buck. He doesn't really want to hang out with his dad, he said, chuckling. Buck slapped his arm. Ow, what the fuck? That's for thinking Chris doesn't want to hang out with you, Buck said, a serious look on his face. Chris loves hanging out with you, Eddie. He might not show it because he is a teenager, but he does. Eddie just blinked for a moment before giving Buck a soft smile. Anyways, Buck, Eddie said, obviously trying to change the topic. I'll go with you so you don't have to stress about who to ask and all of that. Eddie had his arms crossed and he was leaning back in his seat. Buck was ecstatic. He was so happy he could kiss Eddie. He didn't, though. Instead, he just smiled. Thanks, he said, and Buck could see Bobby smile as he turned to look out the windshield. So, Eddie started to say, what am I supposed to wear? Buck smirked. Okay, guys, so that's the end of chapter 1. I don't think I'm gonna record the other chapters tonight. I think I'll do that tomorrow. But yeah. Oh my god, I love this fic so much. Like, actually, I love it so much it hurts. Anyways, yeah. I think that's all for this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, night, morning, evening, wherever you are. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye!